came to our Q&A session before Christmas. I should just say, if it's okay, we'd like to record this session just for colleagues who can't make it. Is everyone okay with that? Anyone not okay with that? Okay, thank you. So we ran a session before Christmas, just before Christmas, which was a Q&A on some of the issues around hubs, and you had a chance to ask some of those questions. What we're doing today is doing something, we're looking at some of those, we've called this myth busting. So looking at some of the follow-ups from those, from that session, and particularly we're joined by two people who run hubs, Katie Jones from the East Midlands and Pamela Price from Foster for Us, which is in the North West. So we'll come to those in a minute just to introduce themselves. So what we thought we'd do is start by talking through some of there's one or two issues that you raised last time at the meeting that we can start with, and then let's have open questions. Please use the chat, please put your hand up, and we can have it more as a discussion, if that sounds okay. I'm also joined, so my name's John Copps, I'm from Mutual Ventures. We're the delivery partner for the Department for Education on this programme, and we have been since mid-2003. So we've been with the 10 hubs on their journey to where they are now. I'm joined by my colleagues Hannah Shapansky and Hannah Sampson, who also work with me on the programme. Do you want to say hello?
Yes, sure. I don't mind going first. Nice to see some of you again, and nice to meet others that I haven't met before. My name's Hannah Shapansky. I'm a senior consultant at Mutual Ventures and your key contact for the West Midlands.
Hi everyone, I'm the other Hannah, Hannah Sampson, also senior consultant. I've worked on the programme since the very start, supporting 5 of the 10 hubs on their journey. So hopefully you can answer any questions that I'm sure Pam and Katie will answer, but if not, I can give it from the perspective of a coach as well. So good to see you all.
Welcome again to colleagues from existing hubs. So hello, Katie.
Sorry, had myself on mute. Hello.
Will you just say a bit about,
Yeah, so please. I'm Katie Jones. I'm the hub manager for Foster for East Midlands. So that's 4 local authorities, Derby City, Derbyshire County, Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire County. And we went live March 25th, 2024. So we're not far off the end of our first year. So we're based in Derby City. We sit in Derby City, and prior to this role, I was the assessment and recruitment manager for Derby City. So I moved across to manage the hub.
Brilliant. And Pam?
Hi there, I'm Pam Price. I'm service lead for Foster With Us, which is 5 local authorities in Lancashire and Cumbria. So that's Blackburn with Darwen as the lead authority, Lancashire County Council, Westmoreland and Furness, Cumberland and Blackpool Council. We went live on the 14th of May 2024, so just a little bit behind Katie. So hopefully we'll try our best to answer as many of your questions as possible today from our experience.
Brilliant, thank you both for joining us. So as I say, please think up questions and we'll have this as a discussion. You can put your hand up or put them into chat. Let me start with one that came up before Christmas, and that I know caused a lot of discussion at the start of the process of setting up hubs, and it's around the allocation of prospective foster carers between local authorities in a group. So I guess first of all, how were the concerns about that discussed at the start, and then what actually happened and how are you managing it? Pam, perhaps you could start with that.
Yeah, just in terms of kind of some of the earlier discussions, I wasn't actually imposed at the kind of discussion stage for some of that, but obviously, you know, leading the hub and picking up on some of those very very real concerns, I think, from all 5 of our local authorities, just about that kind of competition, and the whole notion of a hub would in some ways encourage inquirers to look at other local authorities that they might not have considered previously. And I think that is a genuine that was a genuine concern, a kind of anxiety on heads of service DCS's part, that we would potentially reduce inquiries and approvals, rather than, you know, the whole aim of the hub, which was to increase them. In reality, from our perspective, I think when I first came into post, I kind of raised some of those queries myself about, you know, practically how are we going to look at this. And there was an agreed work stream in place, so it was very much around asking the inquiry where they had heard about fostering, were they aware about which local authority that they would like to foster with, and that's very important to do that from the outset. And then if they weren't particularly sure, and we're very open-minded about local authorities, not really sure, just kind of seen Facebook ads or you know, kind of advertising, and they wanted to learn more, we would then start to explore about their support network. One of the questions that was put into the work stream before my time was around where do you pay your council tax? And what we did find, and I think it's really important to kind of mention that to everyone, is that we started off asking that question at the very beginning, but it kind of took us a little bit on a tangent asking that question. So we then changed that quite rapidly to say, look, where have you heard about fostering? And they would say, you know, Blackpool Council. Also, you'd like to foster for Blackpool Council, and you would start having that discussion. But what we have found is that there has been a slight increase in the number of inquirers that are requesting dual initial visits. So, for example, if they're kind of living on the border of Lancashire and Blackburn with Darwin, for example, they may then want to explore dual initial visits. The reality of how many do that, and the reality of how many are coming through really not having any idea about who they want to foster for, is quite, it's minimal, I've found. So I think that was genuinely one of my concerns about how we manage that, and I'm sure you will all be kind of thinking very much the same, but the reality of that wasn't as significant as we expected. But it's very much about how we start that initial conversation, so that we aren't leading them to one particular local authority. I don't know if that helps, and Katie, you might find similar otherwise. Sure.
Yeah, so I know it was, so I was involved from very early days, and I know it was particularly a concern for the cities, because the 2 cities sit as little sort of holes in the donuts with the larger shires around them, and we knew that a lot of their foster carers came from outside of the city, so that was a real worry for them. We went through a whole procedure of very complicated mathematical equations. We have some brilliant data analysts who are part of the service, and they were really helpful. And we were never able to find an official way of divvying allocations up that meant that people got what they wanted, basically. So we went back to aiming for around a 25% split, with being 4 local authorities. We're set up a little bit differently from Pamela's hub, in that we're a central funnel through for all the initial visits and for all the inquiries and all the initial visits for the 4 local authorities. So they get 1 initial visit from the 2 social workers on the hub, or one of the 2 social workers on the hub. We've always, we went back to a list of criteria, really. So first of all, asking people where they want to go. And people either have a very clear idea, or, well, actually either of these would make sense. And it's normally based on transport links rather than anything else. We think about what type of fostering they want to do, because not all of our 4 local authorities offer similar schemes. We think about what the need is in that local authority. So, for example, we had 1 local authority that said in the very early days, we don't need any more respite carers. However, we appreciate that it's got to be a fair split, because everybody wants a cost saving from this exercise, although that did take a little bit of conversation along the way. And also, I always bring it down to what's best for the child that's going to be cared for by that carer, what makes sense for the carer and what's going to be best for that child. Because, you know, especially if you think about the Peak District, we wouldn't want somebody in the Peak District fostering a baby who has to be brought all the way down from the Peak District to the bottom of one of our counties every day for family time. That wouldn't be great for anybody. So we try and put a bit of common sense in there as well. And most people where we have had those conversations, actually, I think this local authority might work a bit better for you. I've been really open to hearing that. And I have found it over time, it's gone up and down. So two of the local authorities really started to pull ahead, and lots of people were getting a bit nervous and saying what's happening. Then two of the other local authorities started to catch up. Then one of the local authorities started to lose a few more. So I think now we're around about a point where everybody has had pretty much perhaps one or two different, the same amount of allocations. And that's happened without much strategic meddling from us, we've found. It's just happened quite naturally. But I know it was a big worry, and that worry has reduced as we've gone along. But it's always something we keep an eye on. We've had a discussion. I meet on a weekly basis with the 4 other team managers to talk about where it's best for people to go. And that's really helped, because it means that the process is also transparent. So people can't say one local authority is getting an unfair advantage, because everyone's part of that decision making. We had a discussion this morning regarding a person, a single person, and about where they need a certain level of support from other carers like them, and where they would best get their needs met, their support needs, but also where makes the most sense for the type of fostering they want to do for where the children might come from. And actually, where I thought they might go, we've made decisions to go to a different local authority that actually made much more sense. So that regular communication, that regular meetings really helped with that, I would say.
And Hannah Sampson, from your point of view, in terms of having worked with 5 areas, 5 or 6, what have you noticed in terms of, because I remember this being a really big concern at the start.
It definitely was, and I think that where Pam wasn't there in the Northwest, I was, and it got brought up at multiple meetings and probably derailed quite a few meetings. And as Pam said, it's not been the reality, and that's fair to say that's the same for the other hubs that I've worked with as well. And I know my colleague Anya, who's worked with the other 5, has found it as well. I think it's a very logical thing to be worried about. And then in reality, when it is that kind of foster carer led and working out what's best for the child, it hasn't really come out as a major issue. I think the key point that Katie made is absolutely right about the transparency. I think there is a bit of nervousness in some local authorities about the hub making decisions on behalf and people not understanding how those decisions were made. And I think with good data collection and good relationships with the fostering managers in each of the local authorities, that's helped also alleviate some of those concerns. And as both Katie and Pam said, it's just not been a problem once the hub's got up and running, so long as you have those open conversations.
Pam, do you want to come back? And while
Yeah.
Pam's talking, if other colleagues could think of questions or any follow-ups, then please put your hand up.
Just wanted to kind of add to what Kate had mentioned, really, in terms of so for example, we have one larger local authority in our hub, in our cluster, that really do not need any more baby carers, baby foster carers, and they've said that they aren't kind of in a position to accept anymore. Whereas one of the neighbouring authorities is absolutely crying out for baby carers. So in that respect, there have been many positives. You know, that is with that discussion and that agreement that we're keeping those potential foster carers within the local authorities, because they would alternatively have gone to IFAs. So we have been in a position, obviously, with that discussion between heads of service and team managers to say, well, if you don't want to accept anymore, can we offer to this local authority? So there have been some benefits with that. And I also think at the very beginning, it did kind of force the hand of some of the fostering teams to really review and revise their thresholds. I think some of the thresholds from some of the fostering teams maybe necessarily hadn't been looked at for some time and were a little bit rigid. And one of the whole notion of the hub is to rule people in before we rule them out. So it really did kind of encourage local authorities with discussion with other local authorities, well, what's your threshold? What would you accept? And then it kind of broadens that. So in reality now, the thresholds from our 5 authorities are more or less identical, because it's kind of made them a little bit more open-minded. So just thought it was important to kind of raise that, really.
Thank you. Sukriti from Coventry.
Hi everyone, this is really helpful. Can I just ask a question? We know that, so in terms of attracting people to first find out about fostering and make those initial inquiries, we know that local authorities have tended to be pretty good at that and coming together. And I think it'd be interesting to hear how that has changed, whether you've seen an increase in inquiries, but that's not where the issues tend to be later on in terms of getting the numbers of foster carers. I'd be interested to know how many have in fact dropped off after that phase and when the assessment starts, because this is about increasing the numbers. Have we seen a general increase across local authorities who've been part of the hub in terms of the numbers of foster carers they have recruited through the process? And also, you might not be able to answer this because it's too early, but you might be. And also in terms of getting foster carers from the global majority in communities where it might be harder to get foster carers, as well as the teenage foster carers, which is also harder to get. So some of those most difficult parts, and foster carers for children with disabilities. So how are you beginning to see anything with regards to collecting data? Because it's not just about the hub and the inquiries and getting, it's about the through the system bit.
Before Katie comes back, let me just can I make a general point on the data? So Katie is 9 months into the hub, into her. Pamela is Pamela, it was May, wasn't it?
It was May.
So I think it's 8 months in, and we know on average it takes about 8 months to recruit a foster care, to approve a foster carer. So what we don't have yet is enough data to really even project or conclusively say the impact on approvals. What we do have is data on inquiries and data on applications. But I think one distinction to just understand, we're making comparisons, which is quite difficult, is that the hubs started from 0 when they launched. So when comparing it to local authority data, local hubs have only worked with those inquiries that have come in after launch. Whereas if you take a local authority, they will have inquiries that were made the previous year, and they will have potentially applications that are on hold from the previous year. And so it's actually quite difficult at the moment to make comparisons, but really the time lag issue is the big one in terms of demonstrating impact on approvals. But that's a bit of context. But Katie, do you want to?
Yeah, it's like you say, it's been hard because we're trying to prove a concept as we're doing the concept. And some of the data that we've collected, we never collected before. So you're not measuring it against any other data. We have worked out that every one of the 4 local authorities will have approved more foster carers this year than they did the previous year. However, some of those will be before we started. Like John said, those were inquiries that came before we began, and they have just taken a long time for various reasons to actually process through the system. In terms of marketing, the buying power we've had because of being 4 combined lots of money plus Department of Education money is that we've been able to be much more ambitious with our advertising and marketing. And so we've been able to much more target certain communities, certain demographics. We're collecting, there was a lot of discussion very early on around what sorts of data we should take at those very early stages, around ethnicity, around sexuality, because I wanted to make sure that we could measure from a very early stage that we were reaching those communities. And there was, discussions around, is providing that information going to put people off at that very early stage? At what level do you start asking those questions? But I feel we're able to show from the information that we've got that we are doing a good job at hitting more of the communities that perhaps we didn't see us before, and encouraging people to apply as well. But our next piece of work really is to start thinking more about how we can do more sometimes it's about getting to speak to people face to face, isn't it? About how we can do more face to face work. We've got a few specialist events coming up with, for example, an LGBT charity. We're having a specialist event with them. But certainly, I've been really pleased with the level of data we've been getting back about the, the different sorts of people that we're attracting, and the different, family setups and things. And the 2 social workers who go out and do the visits go in very much with a mind of what's the potential, and that's definitely helped as well.
Can I just jump in? Obviously, just to add kind of from our perspective, very, very similar to what Katie has mentioned there in terms of the number of inquiries. I think what we found as a team was that there was very high expectations, as Hannah Sampson will kind of testify, that as soon as we went live, the inquiries and approvals would all start to skyrocket, and it would just kind of be amazing, and all the evidence and data would be there. And we know that the reality isn't that. When we went live, obviously we were then smack bang into the general election and PERDA, so that kind of impacted on some of our launch. We had the notoriously quiet school holidays over the summer, so that did initially cause a little bit of unease from some of the local authorities, thinking, well, is this working? Even though we were literally a matter of months into the programme. But we've done a lot of work in terms of finding a balance between the online comms and marketing and advertising and the recruitment, and we find, well, I think we've kind of hit more of a balance now with that. So to use kind of Cumbria as an example, very rural, large rural area, small communities, farming communities, we've really had to kind of modify and change our strategies, and I think it's that kind of one size fits all approach that we were kind of trying and testing initially. We know that that doesn't work for all areas and all demographics. So we're doing things slightly differently to kind of fit the target audiences. And as it stands now, we have seen our inquiries start to grow and our conversion rates start to massively improve. So that's really important, and kind of learning from the local knowledge and our foster carer buddies or ambassadors that they're called in some areas. They've been absolutely crucial in spreading the word about the hub, because we've kind of really had to remarket ourselves as your local council, foster for your local council, because we did feel, and some of the feedback was, that we looked a little bit like an IFA, and where did the branding fit into that? So it's really been a period of trying and testing, definitely for the first 6 months at least, I would say. But we've come through the other side, and I think we feel that that one size doesn't fit all in terms of marketing and communication is the way forward, really, certainly for us.
Thanks, Pam. Hannah, did you want to?
I was going to add about the local context, and then Pam covered it, but I think it's an important message to say that where we've seen it really work in hubs is where local comms and marketing is still happening, because they do have that local knowledge and that insight, and that the regional comms and marketing was almost on top of, to support and complement rather than to replace. And I think the one size fits all is absolutely right, but it's then with the support of local authorities who know their communities best to kind of help make sure it's targeted in the right way. So it's a bit of a dual approach.
Katrina.
Oh yeah, thank you. Kate Robinson, Service Manager from Wolverhampton. I suppose it's just a query going back to talking about the allocation and fair allocation process. And whilst I appreciate foster parents ultimately need to lead the decision making, and we can kind of support that, how does it work if the local authorities have got very distinct offers, or in terms of fees and disparity around that? Has it encouraged local authorities to standardise their offer a bit more? And are local authorities at a disadvantage if they aren't then paying more or offering? For example, I know one local authority offers exemption for council tax. So how does that work with fair allocation?
I think that was one of our risks that we identified, and I'd say it still is a risk. We did a lot of scoping to find out the impact, because we all do have different financial offers and different support offers, and we've never reached a point of being able to standardise that, despite scoping out how much it would cost, what that would look like. I wouldn't say it's made a huge amount of difference in people's choices. I'd say where it has become a little bit of an issue is our existing foster carers who've rung and said, well, I found out that if I'm a baby carer for this local authority, I would be getting paid more. And we've encouraged people to think about the work that's going on, see if we can level up so all local authorities are offering the same. But I'd say that's still something that is a challenge that we're working with. It also is more of an issue for any IFA transfers that come through, because they very much will ask about finances very, very quickly. It's always one of the first questions they ask, we find, whereas other more general inquiries don't tend to ask about money very early on. In terms of people who've inquired with us, just general inquiries, I'm not sure I have had anybody say, I want to go to this local authority because of what they offer. Whether they do, and we just don't know that, because we've made all the offers very, very clear about what people do offer, so they can see. And we really try and highlight the strengths of each local authority, because obviously different people have different different sorts of services that they offer. But I don't think anyone's ever said, other than existing foster carers, I want to go to this one because they pay more. And actually, when you look at it, although the offers do look very, very different, quite often when you put it all together, there isn't a huge amount of difference between them, but it's just how they're structured quite often, isn't it?
I think from our perspective, we have had a small number, but we have had a number of potential applicants that have said, certainly those that have requested dual initial visits, that one of the larger local authorities in our cluster does pay significantly more. When somebody's inquiring and requesting dual initial visits, then obviously the fee does come into that. So we have had people kind of quoting that finance has played a part.
So Pam, when you say a small number, what magnitude are we talking about? Are we talking about a handful or?
A handful, yeah. A handful. I'd say off the top of my head about 8 or 9. So it isn't huge in the scheme of things, but to the local authorities it is, understandably. What we've kind of done to push back with that is we've got kind of a one-page profile for each local authority. So we will say competitive fees and the whole raft of offers, support, services. So one of our smaller authorities that doesn't pay as much, we find that when we were speaking to some of the assessing social workers, they weren't necessarily overly clear on what the support offer was. And that, to be honest, that was something that was across the cluster. The social workers are going out and doing the initial visits, but weren't necessarily fully up to speed with the full offer from the local authority in terms of support. So not only are we using the one page you were calling it, really, they're taking that out to the inquirer when they go out to do the initial visit, because it's something they can kind of tangibly look at and say, this is what I will get. And we've had some positive feedback from that. What it has done is force the hand of some of the smaller local authorities to review their fees and allowances, because we have to be realistic. If there is a significant difference, that is something that our directors have looked at and are currently reviewing about how we can potentially look to pay more in certain areas.
And just to put it in context, I think that's about 8 or 9 within about 700 or some 700, 650, 700 inquiries in the.
We've had just over 700 inquiries since May, and that's about 8 or 9. So it's a drop in the ocean, but yeah, it's nonetheless.
Thank you. We move on to another question, which is around the role of, so people mentioned this last time, the role of the lead local authority in a cluster. What does that mean? What's the burden? How does it work? Katie?
That's been an interesting one that we've sort of learned more and more about as we've been going through in terms of resources. So because of how our area is structured, we've been very lucky that the team has all been able to be based in one place in Derby City, which geographically made a lot of sense. And so the way our hub is structured is each local authority put one of their existing recruitment officers into the hub. We employed 2 more, and we also have 2 social workers who also come from within our 4 local authorities. So we made lots of arrangements around what working from Derby City was going to look like for those people coming into Derby City. So we not only are we based in Derby City, but it's our support services that support the hub. So within our budget, we have a certain percentage of of money that's there for the financial impact on the financial services that Derby City need to put in. So when we're putting invoices through, it gets processed. Sorry, excuse my dog. It gets processed by the general Derby City finance team. We get legal advice, especially around setting up contracts, and also GDPR and information governance. So we pay a certain percentage of our budget for those support services. We pay for the space that we have because we're sort of in Derby City but external to Derby City. And what we've found when looking at going forward for next year is those are things that we've really had to think about, making sure we still put some money into. So the IT team, because we pay for a website that sits within the Derby City server, so we make a contribution towards that. The telephones all come through Derby City, so some of that more infrastructure stuff. And also the project management. So we've had project management from Nottinghamshire and also project management from Derby City, because sometimes you need somebody within your local authority who can help reach to those certain points within that local authority. So knowing who the right people are to talk to and getting time with those people. So that's certainly something that I've learned a lot about, is what that means if you're the host local authority. And we're coming up with new things all the time. So, for example, we needed some legal advice around an issue with someone's visa, and whether that would mean whether they could foster or not, what that would mean. And I went to my Derby City legal colleagues, as I would have done this time last year, and they said, oh, well, are you paying for this piece of advice? Then we had to think about what we've got contracted around that. So it's certainly been very interesting. Does that sort of answer the question, John?
I mean, it answers my question. I wonder if colleagues in the room have questions around that, because I know it will be part of the decision-making process. I don't know, Pamela, do you want to reflect on any of that?
Yeah, I think just to say something a little bit different, absolutely, very similar again, as I keep saying, to Kate's experience. But for us, one of the challenges was our IT systems, as Hannah will kind of know. Our IT system that we use is that of Blackburn with Darwen Borough Council, and with that, a lot of the emails, for example, a lot of the images that you would see on websites, various things like that, which has been a real learning curve for me, I've got to say, in terms of all of this, but has been blackburn.gov.uk, and understandably from the very beginning, other local authorities do not want another local authority's email address. So we've had to do work behind the scenes, and at the beginning quite a bit of work to try to find ways around that, and it hasn't been easy, and I think we're at the process now where we're looking at potentially procuring an independent provider for our IT systems, purely for that very reason. But obviously as the lead in terms of some of the expectations, I think we've been lucky just by chance really that all of us in our hub are external to the local authorities. We had one person that came from secondment from one of the LAs to our hub, and that has now ended, and she's chosen to go back for various reasons, so that all of our hub are external, and I think that really that's been beneficial for us, so that local authorities don't feel there's any kind of, I don't want to say favouritism, but that they don't feel that we're kind of swaying towards one local authority more than the other.
Thank you. Selma.
Thanks, John. Hi, I'm Selma from Coventry. Just further on that, Pamela, just some clarification on maybe the lead, but maybe collective decision, especially around the recording systems that's then used in the hub, and that how that kind of like integrate with the local systems of each local authority, linked to reporting, stats, any of them.
Yeah, so we have, like I say, a system that has been procured by Blackburn with Darwin. It's something that is used by the lead local authority called DCP, but DCP doesn't necessarily do everything that we need it to do, and it certainly doesn't speak to systems in Liquid Logic, for example, that or Mosaic that the local authorities in our cluster use. So in terms of the initial work stream that was in place about how this would work, then we've had to do a lot of kind of sitting around a table and looking at operationally, how will this work? How will we pass data from one to another? And I think, you know, we've got kind of two systems that we're using at the moment that is doing the job, but it's not ideal. And we have weekly tracking meetings, and I think that's something that is absolutely crucial for us. The weekly tracking meetings with local authorities that, you know, I'm part of and our recruitment coordinators. I suppose, just to make sure that information is being correctly shared from one LA to the other, but it also has hugely impacted upon the timescales of assessment as well, because there's, you know, we're kind of tracking any drift and delay with assessments and being able to, you know, to review our data week by week, and that has been really beneficial. So, Zelma, if I can kind of summarize anything there, is that our systems don't talk to each other well. It does the job for now, but for me, if you could ask anything I wish I'd have been part of sooner, it would have been which IT systems we were kind of going to be looking at and how it would work in practice.
I think we're also running two systems because, again, finding systems that work with each other was I mean, I was in from quite the early days, and I'm not sure we're in any bit better position. So two of our local authorities have LCS, Liquid Logic, and two had Mosaic. We ended up using a pathway within LCS that we had developed to hold specific information about the hub, and that's good because it means that all the hub information is available in one place, and when we need to provide information, it can give you an overview. Our early sort of contact data is held on Microsoft lists, but we are looking at whether we will. There was lots and lots of exploration in the early days of whether we'd purchase an external CRM, and we ended up going with lists for a whole number of reasons to do with timescale more than anything else, because we obviously set up and got running quite quickly. We're now looking at whether we do need a better CRM. But the CRM can only hold a certain amount of information in terms of quite sensitive data. So that's where it goes into inquiry. Then it's held in LCS. When I allocate to each of the local authorities, I still have to, the systems don't talk to each other, even one LCS system to another LCS system. So when I allocate, I send an allocation email with PDFs of the information that they need, and they then have to be set up at their end on their system. So that obviously has a resource implication for them. But over time, we've found a way that works so that I can give them the information that they need, because they obviously have to report on information as well, and they have systems for getting it up and running on for them. But we were never, I know I think someone's put in the chat that different people have bought different things. It's something I think that we've still got room to grow with in terms of finding the best option.
Thanks, Katie. And yeah, obviously there's data sharing agreements behind all that as well, and various other things that we've worked in the hubs on. Kelly, thanks for being patient.
All right. Yeah, so I've got two questions. One, Katie, you said that you had a recruitment officer into the an existing recruitment officer, and you recruited two more. How were they funded? Was that DfE funding, or was that through the local authorities?
So the hub have funded those two extra posts. That's what we did with some of our budget. And in terms of looking at what each local authority can put in, because those recruitment officers wouldn't have had a job had they not come across to us, it made the most sense for them to come across to us. And it's interesting what Pam said about it being helpful that everyone's external, because I found it helpful that we've had 4 people that have been internal because they know their local authority well. And also I have access to their systems in terms of doing a local authority check before I send somebody else on a visit. If I was having to set up Derby City staff to be able to access, for example, Nottingham City's database, the permissions that we would have required, I think we're still working on now, whereas I have somebody that can access that database straight away to look at whether we're going out to do a visit where there's any concerns. But I know all of the hubs have been set up have got very, very different structures, and it's been interesting hearing the different positives and negatives of the different structures. I mean, what it does mean for the two new people we hired, who are Derby City employees, funded through by the project, is that we still don't know by the end of March if they're going to have jobs past the end of March, depending on what happens with our funding, and that's a risk. And so they might say, actually, we've applied for something else. Because I had existing people on the team who'd worked as recruitment officers already with a huge amount of experience, they've been able to train up the new people really well, and while still developing their knowledge of each local authority as well. So I think that's worked really well. But you're right, Pam, does it mean that people are looking at us thinking, well, of course, that local authority is going to do well because they've got this person there or something like that?
Yeah, we
because I was thinking, if you've got let's say, for example, like in the East Midlands, you've got 4 local authorities, and let's say prior to the pilot you had 4 recruitment officers, but to do this you generated 2 more, for example. After the pilot or after the regionalisation has come into effect, do you still have 4 or do you have more? I suppose that's
the 2 additional people have fixed term contracts. So we will look at what one of the decisions will be around extending their contracts. I mean, they're very good, so we would want them to stay. But obviously the 4 people who've come from the existing local authorities, they would just go back to their ordinary jobs. So nobody's lost any jobs.
Yeah. Okay.
And Kelly, just to explain a bit about how the funding works, or for Katie and Pam's, what's happened? The DfE fully funded the setup and the running until until end of March 25, and so the decision at the moment for the local authorities in the hubs is the funding for 25-26, and the DfE have committed 50%, and it's up to hubs to local authorities to make a decision on the other 50%.
Okay, thank you. And then, if you don't mind, my second question is, and I don't know if you know yet, because we all know how lovely the Ofsted dataset returns are, and one of those questions is about inquiries, and inquiries incorporate. I mean, we call inquiries when we've had a conversation with people, but Ofsted require us to incorporate what we call leads. So if somebody's phoned up, left a message saying, my number's 07 blah blah blah, could you call me back? That's technically an inquiry from Ofsted's point of view. So if you're having them into the hub, how is individual local authorities or Ofsted data sets going to record those inquiries for that part of the Ofsted data set? Or is there a special exemption for recruitment hubs this year? I don't know.
I'm just going to jump in. There's some guidance that Ofsted have published about the data return, so we can find that and share that with you. From the top of my head, you are able to submit a single figure for all local authorities for that, and each local authority would submit 0. But don't quote me on that, and we'll get that guidance and share it with you guys. But Ofsted are aware and have come up with a plan. DfE have been working closely with them.
Okay,
that's my understanding, Hannah, as well, that would be the case from reading that. And obviously that all inquiries are actionable, because we've had many a debate about that, haven't we, about the fact that it's actionable. You've not just brushed past somebody in the street and given them a leaflet. It's got to be an actionable inquiry.
Yeah.
Just to put a nuance on that, it depends when the hub launched. So if the hub launched at the start of the recording period, which is 1st of April, I understand, then it's quite easy because it's just the one number from the hub. If the hub launched in June, then actually there's April and May where inquiries have been going to local authorities, so they need adding up with that. So
so we've done that. Oh, sorry.
No, it's gone, Pam. It's all right.
I was just going to say we've got the as part of my kind of sustainability report, we've obtained the inquiries from the 1st of April to the 13th of May and added those to the inquiries kind of for a pre-hub, post-hub, and then total figure as a whole.
some of the early meetings that happened. So obviously I was meeting with people at my level, my manager was service manager was meeting with people at her level, but our data teams were also meeting their equivalents in each local authority. So they were able to develop a really good understanding and speak the same language as each other. And that was really helpful. So they could work out what that was going to mean and how they're going to get those numbers to across from each other. So we also have one number that links them with each of the, when they leave me, they get an extra number added that links onto their local authority and things like that, so we can track them back. But because we had good communication, they were having good communication at their level, same with our IT teams, same with our marketing and comms teams, those bits have kind of worked themselves out really well, I think. And Hannah and I were just having another discussion about the difference between inquiries and contacts just last week.
We were, and that came off the back of a data network session that we've set up with all the data leads from each of the hubs come together and start to unpick some of these issues. So there'll be lots of learning from that group that for those that join, we'll be able to meet with them and to gather some of that. So people have trodden the path before you guys. So hopefully some of the tricky bits will have been worked through, she says, but we're getting there.
And Hannah just mentioned there's a data leads group. So across the hubs, there's various groups for the different expertise where between hubs, sharing of learning can happen, as well as what will happen within hubs. Jessica.
I think my question was about data. It might have already been answered. I wanted to find out from Katie and Pamela what system you're using. I know that it's early days yet to provide any figures, but from collating from May and from the time that you started, Katie, what system are you using? Because you've got your own system, then you've got two different systems that you're using. So what software are you using to collate data? And for the ones in Microsoft, how are you going to incorporate it, given that it's sitting outside of your 3 systems?
So we only have 2 systems. So one is the existing system. So we use LCS. We've had a pathway built within LCS that can give us all the information that we need regarding inquiries, in terms of data returns. The lists data, which is the very early information, that obviously sits on a different system. And we do have, it has a Power BI function and an Excel function. So I send that information across to my data analysts once a month, and then they can produce the data that they need from that as well. We have within the hub, we fund a 0.6 data analyst, and that's been a godsend because I give him the numbers and he gives me lots of lovely pie charts. So that's been really, really helpful, and he can run those from either system that he needs to give the local authorities the information that they ask for, as well as Ofsted.
The other question I had was the recruitment officers in each local authority area. What role are they playing or continue to play? Because you've talked about recruiting more, but the other ones who were they existing recruitment officers from other local authorities? And why are they going back? Is it because the project is running smoothly?
No, we don't know whether they're going to go back or not. I think that's if we got to March 31st and there was no more funding from any of the 4 local authorities alongside the Department for Education funding, then, I mean, obviously this decision we made before that, but they would still have jobs to go back to in their local authority as recruitment officers. But so when they moved across to the hub, their roles remain the same, just as a recruitment officer for the hub rather than a recruitment officer for their local authorities. So they deal with all of the inquiries, they deal with all the events, and then we have 2 social workers that go out and do the initial visits. So their roles have continued, which has been ideal in terms of them hitting the ground running, which was really important at first. And also training up the 2 new people. And should we reach a point that the project had to end, they know they've got a job to go back to, which would be the job that the recruitment officer job, but within their local authority.
Okay, thank you.
Hannah, then Pam, and then maybe we'll go to John for a final question.
Thanks, John. I was just going to add to Katie's point. I think you're quite unique in that you've had people seconded in. There are a couple of hubs that have, but the majority are more in Pam's situation, where they've recruited additional people. And what that has meant is that those existing recruitment officers within local authorities have been able to be used elsewhere. So it's increased the capacity of local authority teams, and they've been able to support the hub, but also work on other things as well. So it's not been a case that anyone has lost their job across the hubs. It's just been a case of being able to use that capacity in a different way.
I think I was just going to kind of say very much the same, Hannah. You've taken the words out of my mouth there. Obviously, we are a little different. We are all on fixed term contracts, just kind of secured year 2, which is brilliant. We have 6 recruitment coordinators, all that have come, well, I say all, 4 out of the 6 have come with prior recruitment backgrounds, 2 of them haven't. And as Katie said, it's been useful that they can kind of train up and support the kind of new recruits to the team, really. But it's been very much kind of carving out a role and job description along the way, as well as setting up a new programme and trying to do everything else that we've talked about. You know, we kind of had the bones of a job description, but you never really know what that's going to look like until you're actually doing the job. And we've done lots of work around that. What we've found is that people have really found their niche. So we've got one recruitment coordinator that is absolutely fantastic with social media. So she would kind of take more of an interest in that side of things. We have somebody else that is, you know, she's just really good at kind of selling and recruiting and kind of promoting and all of that, and being really visible in the community. So that's another benefit. So we've kind of, it's been a period of kind of establishing and finding people's roles and skills, but I think we've kind of we've got the right people in those that can kind of bring a lot of expertise to the team. But you know, we're not as lucky as Katie's team. We are kind of all seconded, fixed term contracts, 12 months in advance.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. John, a final question or comment? You've put yourself on silent.
A blessing, some might say. Yeah, mine was partly about data, but also about agreed priorities. So is there, within the hubs, is there a monthly meeting, say, between the hub and each of the local authorities? So is there a representative from each authority with that? So you've got agreed priorities, you've got you know, agreed data collection and all that sort of stuff. We also know that fostering recruitment seasonal. So you've got January, you've got the fostering fortnights, then you've got September, and then back into January again. So would that meeting agree the priority for what's happening and how each local authority would handle recruitment in their own area, or how the hub was going to do that? And also, I suppose, a bit about for some local authorities, they might have a pressure on baby placements, others might have it on teenage placements or therapeutic placements. How do we use the hub to target those individual needs of the individual local authorities?
Thanks, John. Pam, maybe you've touched already on the different sufficiency issues question. Maybe quickly comment on that.
Yeah, I think just in terms of kind of the meetings and the governance and the agreement kind of for the next steps, I mentioned before, the weekly tracking meetings are absolutely crucial in terms of the day job and kind of the operational side. We have monthly service lead heads of service meetings as well, where we would kind of agree those you know, those priorities, and that's a really useful meeting for people to kind of share experiences and actually kind of offer each other elements of, so for example, one example of that is some training that one of our local authorities offers. They've now agreed to broaden that and offer places for one of the smaller authorities as well, the neighbouring authorities. So it's really kind of come full circle in terms of that collaborative working. We have struggled, as Hannah will testify, with some of our DCS board meetings, just in terms of being able to practically hold those. So one of the things that we're looking at for year 2 is having assistant director meetings quarterly, and then maybe an annual DCS meeting in terms of that feedback to board. But those service lead, heads of service meetings, I think, are absolutely crucial to kind of set the trajectory going forward, really, and the priorities.
Thanks, Pam. And I think I'm conscious people will start dropping off because we're nearly at 1. So I think I'll bring us to a close now, if that's okay. A last thing to say before you go is, so the DfE are very keen, as we said before Christmas, for groups of local authorities to signal their intent to explore being part of a hub. And I know those conversations are ongoing in the West Midlands. So what we'll do after this meeting is share just what that process should look like. And the DfE is simply looking for an email with the directors of children's services in the area copied in, the relevant ones, saying that you're interested in exploring hub design and in February and March. And that is they're keen for that by the 7th of February, but we'll send that round. We'll also send around a copy of this recording for people who haven't missed it, and we'll send around a write-up of some of those questions and answers people have had, and including addressing, Katrina, your question in the chat, which we didn't get round to. So just to say a big thank you to Katie and to Pam for your experience and wisdom and letting us pick your brains. Any other questions, please do talk to us. And Hannah Shapansky is the lead for the West Midlands, so please talk to her and we can answer any further questions. But just remains to say thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. Have a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.